at 4.5 million, 4,558,836. It seems, Minister Cox, just recently we were talking about 1.5, then we hit 2, yes. Then we hit 3. We had 4.5 million cases globally. And sadly, 304,242 persons have sadly died. Again, it seems just recently, yesterday, we were talking about 150,000 deaths, 200,000 deaths. Now we have crossed the 300,000 barrier. And those recovered to date, 1,723,225. Where do we stand with these figures? Of the 4.5 million cases, we have contributed 116. That number remains the same. Of the over 300 deaths, Trinidad and Tobago, of that amount will be 8, 7 in Trinidad, 1 in Tobago. For the recovered and discharges, we would have contributed 107 to that total. And we now only have one person in our hospital system at Cora. That person is stable, is able to walk around, and we wish that person a very speedy recovery. Where are we with testing? The total number of tests done to date are 2,576. 2576. Total number of unique patient tests, 2,165. Total number of repeated tests, 411. Our community testing, which we ramped up a few weeks ago, now stands at 868, and all are negative thus far. What is the status of our step-down facilities, and where are we going with them? Today, hopefully, and plans are being made for the contingent at DB, which was originally 69 people from Suriname plus 1, so 70. Hopefully, and plans are being made now, I am told this morning, for the 69 persons from Suriname to be discharged from DB, so that's very good news for them. I want to thank them for their cooperation and wish them all the best as they return to their communities and their families, and thank those 69 persons for their patience and their cooperation. They really made it easy for us to care for them. The one person we are not going to leave in DB, because the facility is simply too big to house one person, and we want to clean out the facility, and Nurse Gomez could tell you about cleaning and so on. That one person will serve out the rest of their quarantine period in Cascadia. So Cascadia will now have 3 unique individuals. The 12 nurses that came from Cuba, they would have served out their quarantine period. So Cascadia, from later on today, maybe tomorrow, that population will go up slightly from 2 to 3. The Tacarigua facility, we were able to accommodate the 21-person contingent from Guyana. Remember, the Tacarigua facility originally housed the 33-person contingent from Barbados. So we are able to turn around that facility, and the 21 persons from Guyana will be in Tacarigua to serve out their quarantine period. So date for this morning, I just want to correct one thing I said yesterday that was pointed out to me. When I was speaking about the fines for labs, I did say 500,000. That was incorrect. It's 50,000. I inadvertently added a 0. So the fines for private labs not adhering to the regulations is $50,000 or 6 months imprisonment, not 500, as I inadvertently said yesterday, and I do apologize for that error. So, Minister Cox, that's the report I have for you for this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Dr. Saeed Rahman, Director of Veterinary Public Health, will speak on guidelines for food establishments.
Honorable Ministers, members of the media, viewing public, good morning. As we move towards reopening our economy on a phased basis, it is imperative that we, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we all do our part to prevent the spread of COVID-19. While we acknowledge that the food industry is an integral part of our daily lives, if it is not managed properly, it can be an avenue for the spread of COVID. It is therefore imperative that we heed and adopt the core guidelines communicated to you on a daily basis by the Ministry of Health. In this regard, all employers who are involved in food service establishments should develop a comprehensive plan for their establishment. This plan should be specifically tailored to their own specific risks and should be risk-based, meaning that the employer should go through their establishment, identify where possible risks are for the transmission of COVID-19, either to employees or to their serving public, and then adopt control measures as necessary to mitigate against these possible risks. It is important that employers talk with employees about these planned changes. This is a behavioral change issue, and therefore it is not something that is easily adopted. And we should seek their input as they are invaluable to us in planning our way forward. Additionally, we should collaborate with unions and communicate whatever our plans are to our public. First slide, please. We should look at the key principles as identified in this slide. Be healthy, be clean. And I will speak about that in a little bit. If you are sick and you are an employee, then you should stay home and you should report your sickness to your particular supervisor. It is important that we instruct sick employees to stay home, and if they are at work, send them home immediately or call 77-WELL or 800-WELL for further guidance. Once an employee is at work and they are sick and they have been sent home, it is important that we clean and disinfect the surfaces where they were in contact with. It is important to ensure that workplace controls are put in place to prevent transmission between employees. Employers, on arrival of their employees, should pre-screen their employees to make sure that they are well and fit for work. Employees themselves should conduct regular self-monitoring for the signs of COVID-19. And if they present with any of these complaints, call our hotline and do not come out to work. Employees are also advised to wear a face mask. Most food establishments are small in nature, and it is difficult to ensure social distancing between parties, and therefore one should wear a face mask. Employers should ensure that their workstations are adequately spaced. Sometimes, as I said, many of these food establishments are very small, so that may be difficult to achieve. Practice social distancing wherever possible and stay at least 6 feet from one another. It is important for employees, and our infection specialists will talk a little bit about hand washing, but we cannot overemphasize. Wash hands for at least 20 seconds with soap and water. And you should wash your hands anytime you go to the bathroom, wherever you leave your workspace to go to another place and return, you should wash or sanitize your hands. Before and after eating, if you cough or sneeze, you should also immediately wash your hands. If hand soap and water is not available, as mentioned before, the use of sanitizers with alcohol content of 65% or over is recommended. Avoid touching your face, your hands, and other places. I looked at a video this morning of an experiment in Japan showing a buffet where one person sneezed on their hands and within 30 minutes transmitted the infection. They used a colored dye that was visible under UV light, and after 30 minutes, 70 people had this dye all over their faces, their hands, and different parts of their body. It is therefore important that we observe proper cough etiquette, as would be mentioned later. Before preparing or eating food, as I said, is important also to wash your hands. Next slide, please. So it is important, as you see in some of these slides, some of the good practices as mentioned here. When coming to work, one of our problems of social distancing, these pictures were taken yesterday at our inspection, and these are good practices where employees are having their lunch at their break time and they are appropriately spaced. People in the office area have appropriate spacing between their desks. Even the guy who was selling doubles had his signage with respect to a pickup and takeaway service. Even at the poultry processing plant, as shown in the picture, you can see that workers who are on the processing line are adequately spaced in their individual workstations, and they are wearing their masks as well. Routine, frequent cleaning is required at all times. Especially most food service establishments have what is called a standard sanitary operating procedure, which details cleaning pre-operatively and post-operatively. That must now be amended to include should be mixed at 5 tablespoons to a gallon, and cleaning with soap and water should precede disinfection. This is very important. Chlorine disinfectants do not work well in the presence of organic material. Therefore, if you have dirt on surfaces, the chlorine will cling to the dirt and not be able to disinfect possible virus that may be present. Next slide, please. This slide looks at practices that should be avoided. Here we see people lined up at a cafeteria and they are not wearing masks, nor are they practicing social distancing. So this should be avoided. Sinks at this facility did not have any soap that was present. And we are all familiar with the picture with the persons lined up for doubles, not adhering to social distancing, nor were they wearing masks. So we should try to avoid all of these practices. Last slide. As we move into the new normal, delivery, curbside pickup will now be something that is very important and something that families and homes will be looking towards. In order to make your business a viable one, it is important that you adopt these new strategies. There are many online applications that can be downloaded, and many businesses are now subscribing to these. You can do drive-through with respect to picking up your food items or calling and ordering at home. Many supermarkets thankfully, are now offering these services so that you do not have to go out and be exposed. While enjoying your favorite foods and whatever you need to do in your daily lives, it is important to still stay safe. We at the Ministry of Health are committed to working with all establishments. Our public health inspectors are out daily looking at establishments, and we will help guide you. We hope that by early next week, we will put out some draft guidelines that will help guide your establishments, but feel free to contact us at any time through our county medical officers and our public health inspectorate to get assistance in developing your plans and moving forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that important information. At this time, we'd like to Keisha Privat Gomez, infection control nurse at Cora Hospital, will speak about personal hygiene measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Honorable Minister, good morning, the viewing public.
Good morning.
The Infection Prevention Control Team at the NCRHA knows that good hygiene practices plays an essential role in preventing and protecting our healthcare workers and the wider community from diseases, especially during an infectious outbreak such as COVID-19. Hand hygiene, to be more specific, includes hand washing with regular soap and water or hand sanitizing with an alcohol-based solution. It is important to note that when hands touch a surface, they pick up microorganisms, and as it comes in contact with another surface, it deposited these microorganisms. For this reason, it is important to practice proper and frequent hand hygiene. When washing or sanitizing your hands, it is important to make contact with all the surfaces of the hands, especially those hard-to-reach places, such as the back of the hands, between the fingers, as well as the nail beds. Here, we're going to do a demonstration on the steps involved in proper hand hygiene. Okay, hi. So we're going to demonstrate a hand washing video. First thing we're going to do is wet our hands. We're going to put sufficient soap in the palm of our hands, and then we're going to lather in a circular motion. Then we're going to do palm to dorsum, Then we're going to get the side of our fingers in a circular motion. Then we're going to do the backs of our fingers, circular motion. And we're going to do our thumbs again in a circular motion. Then we're going to do our fingernails. This process also takes 40 to 60 seconds. And then we're going to wash our hands at this point. Ensuring all the soap has been removed. Then you shake off the excess water, and you use a tissue to dry your hands. Not a cloth, paper towel that can be discarded. Right. In the healthcare settings where the risk is greater, hand hygiene, whether it be hand washing or hand sanitizing, ought to take 40 to 60 seconds. However, in the communities, one needs to perform this practice with a minimum of 20 seconds. Persons should also note that when they cough or sneeze, they should practice good hygiene and cough into a tissue, a disposable tissue, cover their nose and mouth, and discard same immediately after. Or cough into their flexed elbow and perform either hand washing or hand sanitizing immediately after. Hand hygiene must be done. As mentioned before, hands, when you touch a surface, will pick up microorganisms. This is why it is important to practice proper, frequent, and regular hand hygiene. Also, be mindful not to touch your face, your nose, your mouth, or your eyes, or come in contact with your food prior to proper hand sanitizing. If you don't, microorganisms have the potential to go into your food or come into your eyes or nose or mouth. Hence the reason why frequent and proper hand sanitizing via hand washing or hand sanitizing is important and will prevent the spread of infections.
Thank you very much. Members of the media, the floor is now open. Remember to identify yourself and the media house you represent before posing your question. We want to give as many of you an opportunity to pose questions to us, but that means in our limited time, we will have to give each media house a chance to get a maximum of 2 questions in. Once we have completed the pool and time allows, I will come back to you. So let us keep this in mind as we begin taking your questions. 98.1.
Good morning again to the head table. Stephen Cummings, 98.1 FM. 2 questions, one for Dr. Rahman and one for Minister Dayal Singh. I'll go first with Dr. Rahman. Dr. Rahman, I'm wondering about detailed measures regarding the trade, use, and preparation of wild animals for consumption. Our culture is basically steeped in exotics, and we do have a very thriving trade in wild meat at our farmers market. Can you speak to any guidelines specifically as it regarding wildlife traders and how they can go about protecting not themselves but also the population? Minister Dayal Singh, you responded to this question before when you said that we cannot test an entire population. Mm-hmm. The Chinese city of Wuhan is now drawing up plans to test its entire population of, I believe, 11 million for COVID-19. I'm also informed that their plans, these plans are in its early stages. Learning from the epicenter and what they are doing, has this in any way influenced a shift in our policy considerations for Trinidad and Tobago, which has a smaller population, 1.4?
Okay, so I'll go first and then Dr. Rahman will go second. We have said from the very beginning, every country needs to do its own risk assessment. You would recall when we closed our borders to China, that was our type of response based on our risk assessment. The issue of testing an entire population is one for every country to take on board. However, if you test an entire population today, and for argument's sake, Mr. Cummings, all the tests come back negative, what does that tell you? Do you need to test everybody tomorrow? Do you need to test everybody next week? Because all you will get is a snapshot in time that this person is negative. But the person can become positive tomorrow. So testing an entire population for Trinidad and Tobago is not something that we are looking at right now. The CMO and myself, looking at international best practice, have determined that testing 1.4 million persons right now does not make any sort of clinical sense or logistical sense. Because once you start that, then you have to test everybody every day. Because what you get is a negative result today, but the person can become exposed to the virus, as Dr. Rahman says, tomorrow. And what do you do then? So it's not something that we are looking at, but thank you for the question. It gives us an opportunity to explain to the population how we are thinking. So thank you very much for the question, sir.
Dr. Rahman?
So with respect to the questioning of wild meat and trade in wild and exotic animals, first of all, we should realize that the season currently is closed. So by law, sale of wild meat is prohibited at this time. However, as time goes on, we will be looking to reopen the season later this year. Currently, we have done a draft policy with respect to the sale and consumption of wild meat in Trinidad and Tobago. But this has to get approval, as we understand that many persons live off the means of hunting, and it is an important thing in rural communities. It is something that we have to get their input into. However, from a food safety standpoint, wild meat presents a very unique challenge. First of all, animals are shot at field and they are not properly dressed. Neither is there inspection of those animals, what we call ante-mortem and post-mortem inspection. Frequently, these animal carcasses have a lot of bruises and they do not bleed properly, which allows rapid spoilage. Thirdly, lead shots that are used in hunting are themselves dangerous and can be toxic. And we have seen on research from rural communities and other countries that they have predisposed certain populations, especially children, to lead poisoning. So this is a policy going forward, and we will let the public know once we have public discussions on the way forward with respect to that. It should be noted that in the public health ordinance currently, under the sale of fresh meat regulations, wild meat is not mentioned as a commodity that can be sold, but there's an exemption for it entering the market. So it's a unique situation that needs to be looked at.
TV6.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News. What I wanted to, in terms of my questions this morning, with respect to Dr. Rahman, this question is directed to you. In light of the public health ordinance, and in terms of us rolling into and continuing into phase 1, as mentioned by the Prime Minister, would you say there is adherence at this time to the public health ordinance in terms of adherence to various food establishments, in your opinion, from your visits as of today? And also my second question, most likely Minister Cox will transfer this information to the Social Development Minister in light, specifically to Tobagonians. If we can get an update to social grants for unemployed person, and rental grants in Tobago, how many have been processed and monies received by these individuals? Because we are constantly getting information from persons who are saying in Tobago specifically that they have not received any monies to help them with their rents from the government, and many of them have faced eviction.
Okay, thank you. I would pass on this information. Okay. I'll try to get as much info. Hopefully before this program is finished, I should be able to give you some info.
Dr. Rahman.
With respect to the adherence to the public health ordinance, currently our public health inspectors have gone to all the first phase where roadside vendors and fruit vendors and these other establishments were allowed to open. We did a survey of all of them in Trinidad and Tobago to look at compliance. And it was surprising that the small establishments, the small fruit vendors and so forth, they had most of these initiatives in place. And those that were not, we advised them what to do and the way forward. We continue to do our surveillance. The pictures that I showed previously in my presentation were from yesterday. And you can clearly see that a large establishment we visited yesterday with the public health inspectors had no social distancing at their lunchroom area where large numbers of employees were sitting. And obviously, you cannot wear a mask if you're having lunch. So that presents a unique problem. So we have some levels of non-compliance, and we are addressing it going forward.
Okay, thank you. We move to Express.
Good morning, Camille Hunt, Express.
Hi, morning, Camille.
Minister Dialsing, I'd like to know what is the cost of using the Cascadia Hotel as a quarantine facility, and was a contract signed for the use of that facility? And also a question to Ms. Pravat Gomez. Can you share your personal feelings dealing with COVID-19 patients as a nurse? What has that experience been like for you, and do you have any fears or concerns?
Okay, so thank you for the question. So let me put the cost of Cascadia in context, because I don't want it to be lost out of context. To set up the Tacarigua Rocket Center, initially for the contingent from Barbados, would have cost the taxpayer close to $1 million. $1 million. Large number of people. The cost of Cascadia per room, as we stand now, is $400 per night for a single room and $600 per night for a double room. So you have the cost that we spent on Tacarigua Rocket Center. However, to house the second batch of people in Tacarigua, remember that sunk cost would already been made to outfit. The cost going forward will be the cost of healthcare professionals, food, consumables, and so on, which we don't have to spend at Cascadia because it's a different clinical presentation of patients. In the case of Davie, we had to spend close to another $1 million to outfit Davie, exclusive of the cost that we would have spent for external works like fencing and so on. So these are the costs that the taxpayer has incurred. So I gave you figures for UB Davie campus, Tacarigua Rocket Center, and the cost for Cascadia, as I said, $400 per night for a single room and $600 a night for a double room. Thank you very much.
I think there's another question for
for Nurse Gomez.
Nurse Gomez.
Well, as a nurse, I felt confident going into dealing with patients with COVID-19. The NCRHA adequately prepared all clinical staff in terms of donning and doffing way before we had our first patient. So staff felt comfortable knowing what to do and when to do it. We had the right PPEs that was approved by CDC, so we were really, really confident going into dealing with the patients. Because it was a new disease, you would meet people who unsure about what's going to happen, looking at what's happening internationally. And the staff, all of the staff, you know, we really developed a close friendship with our patients. We counsel them, we befriend them, and we really together walk them through the process. NCRHA prepared the environment, getting everything ready for patients to make them most comfortable. I partake in that process. We went to each facility, making sure that everything was ready for them. So at the end of the day, I feel really confident with what we were doing, what we are doing, and what we continue to do at this point.
Just one bit of, I forgot, for the Tacarigua Rocket Center, that $1 million did not include a donation, and I want to thank Unicoma now. Unicoma made a donation of 50 beds and 50 nightstands 24 to 48 hours before the Trinidad contingent from Barbados came in. So to that $1 million, you really have to also add the cost of that donation from Unicoma, and I want to thank them. They rose to the occasion. And that Tacarigua Rocket Center, a lot of money was spent. And I also want to thank the nurses of the ERHA who spent time there. I don't think anybody thanked them. And you may remember, we had from our disaster management unit, Patty Ann Williams here last week, Minister Cox. Yes. That girl spent about 4 sleepless nights getting that facility ready for those people from Barbados. I remember the day we had to put up the tints on the windows because the windows were not tinted. We had to give those people privacy. And that was the day of the roadblock on the Solomon Ho-Choi Highway. And the contractor doing the tint work, their truck was caught up for 4 hours in that thing. And that girl, that young lady, Minister Cox, stayed with those contractors until 2 a.m. in the morning to prepare Tacarigua. And I want to thank her because no thanks was given to the local nurses, to the local taxpayer, to Patty Ann Williams, to the nurses. So I am glad for this opportunity to thank the public officers and the taxpayer for all that they did for Tacarigua. And now we have another batch of people who would have gone in there, and I want to just give thanks and praise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We move to CLC, Yolande Thomas.
Hi, good morning. Yolande Thomas from Caribbean Lifestyle Communications. I have 2 questions. The first question is about the 12 nurses from Cuba. Where will they be integrated into in terms of the health system? The fact that there is just 1 patient in the system. And the other question is relating to persons who sell the glass panels. They are wondering whether or not they are allowed to apply their trade, given the fact that they are getting requests from doubles vendors and a lot of persons, essential businesses, to apply their trade.
Yeah. So all hardwares are open, and I actually visited a couple hardwares, and they have glass panels and they have the plexiglass panels. On the issue of the nurses from Cuba, that will, where they are deployed, how they will be deployed will be a decision made by the chief medical officer, and they will be deployed according to need, wherever the needs are in Trinidad and or Tobago. Thank you.
I-95.5.
Good morning, Whitfield Turner from I-95.5. I have a couple of questions. I believe Mr. Dialsing might be best suited to answer them. First up, we are seeing around the region countries gradually relaxing their measures with respect to COVID-19. And the questions are, how concerned are you that this may further heighten calls for speeding up of the reopening of our economy, given that most of these countries are not as well off as we are in terms of managing the disease? And also, have they contacted this government with a view to getting the blueprint as to how we were able to manage so well with our disease? And my second question, which may also include the Minister of Education, what solution can be implemented to accommodate students who need to wear masks during exams, especially like CSEC and so forth, especially those with comorbid respiratory issues, as this may impact their ability to perform, and also the ventilation in some classrooms may not be ideal for the wearing of masks.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will try to answer as many of the points that you have made. What is happening in Trinidad and Tobago is that, fortunately and unfortunately, depending on your perspective, we are suffering from our own success. It's a double-edged sword. If we were not successful, and sorry to be grim, but I think this is the only way to get the message across, and you had a lineup of coffins and a lineup of hearses, there would not be the calls to flip a switch and open the economy. Because we managed our situation locally so well, and we kept mortality down, and we kept our infection rate down to 64, because you always have to take off the cruise ship component. That wasn't locally, acquired. It is because of that success that people have lost sight of the fact that we are in a global pandemic. Yes, we have done well, but we have done well because we had a robust response. And we will continue to do well with our phased reopening if everyone just exhibits a little bit of patience and understanding. What we are trying to avoid, if you use the dimmer approach, you turn up the light slowly and gradually as opposed to flipping a switch. If you flip the switch and you open everything and you have 1,000 infections and a lineup of hearses, then people will say, oh gosh, we need to lock down. And then you seesaw back into last week. We are trying to avoid that by using the dimmer approach. Turn up the lights slowly, put the current in slowly. Let's see what we get in this first phase. And we are starting the crucial part of this first phase next week. By the end of next week, we will know or have a better picture of where the hidden pockets of infections lie. So I urge, and I just touched my face, I urge everyone to be patient. We are doing this to save lives so that you will have a livelihood to go after next week. We don't want you to have a livelihood now, but lose your life. There's a thin line between a life and a livelihood. I understand the livelihood argument, and it is a valid one, but there's also the life argument. So I hope that answers the question about relaxation. Did anyone contact us about what we have done? The answer is yes. The CMO has been contacted. I have been contacted. And as the Prime Minister said when he spoke last week, Saturday, many of the world leaders he has spoken to have asked us, what did we do? And he has shared that information. So I hope that comprehensive answer assists us. Thank you very much.
Newsday.
Yes, Julian Neves from Newsday. Two questions to Dr. Rahman. You mentioned, well, you know, we're going out and we are checking out all of these food establishments and so forth. Could you just walk me through the process? You go to a food establishment, you find that they've, you know, breached one of the protocols. Could you just lay it out? It goes from warning to second warning to then fine. Could you just walk me through the penalization process, how that works? And secondly, you spoke about some of the dangers with the wild meat, the lead poisoning and so forth. I'm just wondering, do we currently have any studies about another danger possibly of us contracting viruses from the wild meat we consume, if there are currently studies, and if not, if there are any plans in train to have such studies? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. I'll answer the second one first, the wild meat. We are currently conducting studies at the University of the West Indies. We have Dr. Rod Supal and some other researchers doing research on wild meat and some of the pathogens that they carry. We have had wild meat studies in the past, particularly with Trypanosome cruzi, T. cruzi, that causes disease and heart conditions in humans, and we have found this is carried from wild animals through a bug called kissing bug, and we have found positive animals in the past. So there is some evidence of wild animals carrying many of these diseases. With respect to leptospirosis, all of these wild animal species do carry leptospira in their carcasses, and especially when they are not eviscerated or gutted properly at capture, then this can be one of the serious conditions. Gastrointestinal parasites like Salmonella are present in many wild species, and they also present a particular risk. So that is with respect to wild meat. In terms of the process for inspection, right now we are doing spot checks, so we are not announcing as opposed to an audit. There are two types of inspections that we conduct. One is spot checking, and the other is a food safety audit. A food safety audit is very, very structured, and we have a very rigid format for conducting that. But right now we are doing spot checks because we want to see as much establishments as possible in the shortest time possible. And we are also not waving the hard stick as it is in terms of compliance, and we have had very good cooperation from businesses thus far. So there's been no need for enforcement. So what happens is that the public health inspector will first go to the establishment and look at things from a distance without engaging the employer. Look at whether or not they have, for example, the hand washing stations present, whether they have soap, whether there's hand towels, and the collection of trash. They can see that without engaging the employer. Then they will look at the practice. Do people coming into the establishment, are they required to do this, or is just the hand sink and the soap basin and whatever, is that just as face value? So whether or not they have someone who is a monitor, monitoring whether or not people are adhering to that practice. Other than that, the public health inspector will then go into the establishment, identify themselves, and look. In terms of a food establishment, we are not just looking at COVID. We remember, for example, in our inspection yesterday, we went primarily for COVID, but we had to close a cafeteria because they were not keeping their foods at the right temperature. Okay. Neither did they have the appropriate approvals for producing those foods on that premise. And so the food sale was immediately stopped, and the person was advised to remove all the food from the premises. So when an inspector goes, they will go through these different steps. Currently, as I said, we are not looking at fines so much, but we have had discussions. We had a virtual meeting with OSH as well as the Ministry of Labor day before yesterday, to discuss the way going forward with respect to especially the large factories and larger establishments who may not be doing what they should be doing, whether or not, if they do not comply, what fees and penalties can be imposed.
Thank you. TTT.
Good morning. Good morning, Khrystal Wilson, TTT Limited.
Morning,
my
Khrystal.
question is for either Dr. Rahman or Nurse Privat, and it's with respect to businesses that have adopted the practice of having customers wash their hands before entering. Within recent times, it appears as though these soap solutions are extremely diluted, which I guess causes customers to question the effectiveness of the solutions that are provided for them. With that said, we now back to encouraging the population to have in their possession at all times items for their own sanitizing, or can these businesses be encouraged again to provide the proper solutions for both soap and sanitizers for their customers?
Okay, so I will start off. When we go to do the inspection, this is one of the things we look at, whether or not, and we ask them for the particular product that they have, whether they have they must have the product. They will usually refill into these soap dispensers. So they will have the parent product there that has a label on it, and we will look to see whether or not they are diluting that product down with water to try and save cost based on the viscosity of the soap in the parent container compared to that in the dispenser. We can tell whether or not. It's difficult at this time to take samples to send to the laboratory to have it tested, and that is not feasible. So we're really looking at what they're using and whether they're using it based on the manufacturer's instructions with respect to that. However, we still advise that persons should have in their possession, when they're going out, personal hand sanitizers on them. There are these many clip-on types that you can have. I see a lot of women having them on their purses and so on, so that in the event that they think that is not satisfactory, they can use that themselves. Besides that, they will frequently touch things. They cannot go back out to the outside to rewash their hands, so they can use the sanitizer when it is needed.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
91.9.
Yes, hi. Good morning to the panel.
Morning.
Good morning.
Minister
Yes.
of Health, I would just like to find out what is the update on the pursuit of having the mask wearing made mandatory in the regulations. And also, if you could remind us if there is any fines associated with persons gathering in groups of more than 5. I think this Monday it had a social media post that a lot of people were clamoring about. There was a funeral that had more than 5 people. So if you could give us some idea in terms of penalties and stuff attached to that and the mask wearing update.
Thank you very much. I'm going to check my regulations here. So maybe when we come back, I will have an answer on the penalty for 5. But I'll give you the update on the masks. As I said, that is with the Honorable Attorney General, and he will advise me as to where he has reached with that. And while other questions are being answered, I will check my documents here. So you could take other questions.
Okay, it's just one question he had. I think he asked two. One on the
Yeah,
legal
the mask, which I
something else.
answered,
Yes.
and the penalty for gathering in 5. I'm checking the regulations
All right.
now.
Well, in the meantime, I'll
Yeah.
go to CNC3.
Morning, Ministers, Dr. Rahman and Mrs. Pravat Gomez. I have two questions, and they are both for the Minister of Health. So my first question is,
Please
Minister
identify
Dialton, yesterday you
yourself.
took the time to respond to those.
Hello?
Are you hearing me?
Identify
Hello?
yourself, please.
Bhavita Gopal Chan, CNC3 News.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I have two questions,
Sure.
and they're both for the Minister of Health.
Sure.
Minister Dialton, yesterday you took the time to respond to those clamoring for small and medium-sized businesses to be allowed to reopen. However, yesterday the Manufacturers Association issued a call for its remaining members to be allowed to open, given what they're saying is the robust guidelines and protocols already in place. Minister, is any consideration being given to this particular sector?
All right.
And my second question is, can you say how many exemption requests have been received by your ministry from the National Security Ministry of TNT nationals hoping to return home before the borders are officially reopened?
Okay. So the second part of the question needs to be posed to the Minister of National Security. I would not have those granular details on me. As regards to the TTMA, I think I need to revisit the same answer that was asked about relaxing measures. The same answer applies. For this 2-week period, we are using the dimmer approach. We are slowly turning up the heat. We could use an analogy with a stove. We are simmering before we boil. Light switch, low light before we go full intensity. This is being done because we do not know where the hidden pockets of the virus are, and we are using this 2-week period with increased movement, slowly increase of economic activity, which will come with more people congregating, to try to determine where the hidden pockets of the virus are. Whether it's the TTMA or any other organization, we understand, we empathize, we sympathize. We know people are hurting. But if we flip the switch or boil the water too soon, and then our hospital system is flooded, our funeral homes can't cope, you can't dig enough graves, the crematoriums are overcrowded, it means you have failed. And we don't want to fail. As a society, we want to have an opening that does several things at the same time. Create some employment, let businesses open so they could make some profits and pay some taxes, so we could collect more taxes to spend another $1 million on another facility, as I have said. But we can't open up the entire economy at the same time and give in to every single demand. If we do that, we will slingshot back into last week, and all the gains that we have made since January 30th to now, all those gains will account for nothing, and then the same businesses will have to be shut down for a longer period. At the Ministry of Health, we are taking a long-term view. We understand the pressures that people are under, but we are also learning from the mistakes that other countries have made. We are just asking for some patience for 7 days again, and then we will reevaluate based on the numbers we get next weekend. We will advise the decision makers, and as we have said, if the numbers look good, we could look at advancing the other phases. But right now, to give us some sort of baseline figure to move forward, we have to be careful with not giving in to the pressures during phase 1. So again, I hope that answers your question, and we are doing all of this to save lives. Thank you very much.
Okay, Minister, are you ready with the answers yet?
Yes. Dr.
ahead.
Rahman just assisted me here.
Go ahead, please.
A person who contravenes the regulation commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $50,000 and imprisonment for a term of 6 months. Thank you, Dr. Rahman.
You're welcome.
Okay, folks, we have come to the end of our media conference. Our time. Yes, so we have come to the end of this media conference today. Do remember that the Ministry of Health, or before I move on, I just want to tell Liz Williams, TV6, I have not received the information as yet with regards to the salary relief grant that is attached to the Ministry of Finance. So we'll get back to you with that information. Do remember that the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Communications are your only credible sources of government information on COVID-19. Today is designated International Day of Families, but this year will be a celebration of a different kind for many around the world, and right here in Trinidad and Tobago, because of stay-at-home measures. Closed borders mean that some of our loved ones are oceans apart. In some instances, others are in care homes, while family gatherings will now be curtailed. This puts a very different perspective on this year's celebration of the family. The UN's theme is Family in Development, which asks us to focus on the importance of investing in social policies that protect the most vulnerable individuals and families. COVID-19 has revealed some of the vulnerabilities of our family and social systems, but all is not lost because the government has put financial and social support systems in place to assist families in need. We are doing our best to help as much persons as possible during this pandemic. And this period has shown us the power of strong relationships and support systems. And this is what we are urging you to embrace, strengthen, and cherish. Let us use our time in isolation to reconnect to our loved ones, create new bonds, and build relationships. Our families can and must triumph over COVID-19. Happy International Day of Families, Trinidad and Tobago. Let us celebrate by maintaining physical distancing while virtually hugging our family members and reaching out to those who need our support. I am Donna Cox, Minister of Communications. Thank you for joining us today as the government continues its efforts to flatten the curve and beat COVID-19. Stay home, stay safe. May God bless Trinidad and Tobago.
And that was